Welcome to a new episode of TTG Conversations 5 Questions video series. This episode is all about the unusual predicament Singapore hotels are in as a result of this pandemic. Unlike hotels in other larger destinations, hotels in Singapore have only a small domestic market to rely on as international borders remain shut. Taking us through this topic is Kwee Wei-Lin, President of the Singapore Hotel Association. Besides serving as president of the Singapore Hotel Association, Wei-Lin is a senior vice president of hotels at the Pontiac Land Group. She's also a member of the Tourism Recovery Action Task Force, a member of the Emerging Stronger Task Force, and the co-lead for the Enabling Safe and Innovative Experiences in a COVID Environment Alliance. Welcome, Wei-Lin, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Karen.
I've got 5 questions for you, and here's the first. Now, the pandemic has put Singapore's tourism industry in a jam, where we are locked away from all our international source markets and have access only to a small domestic market. What are some of the biggest lessons the pandemic has taught Singapore hoteliers?
So the Singapore Hotel Association represents the voice of 160 members, which is about 60,000 rooms, as well as 40,000 employees. And our role is really to protect the interests and safeguard our members as well as their employees. Pre-COVID, more than 90% of our revenue had been generated by international tourism. As you can imagine, with borders closed, there's hardly any international travels now. So many of our hotels have pivoted to 2 things. One is the stay-home notice, which is essentially a quarantine, as well as staycation business. Because we don't have much of a domestic market, but at least it is a market that is there. I think one of the key things that we've learned is really agility. I think early on in the pandemic, I remember last year already, Chinese New Year, we could feel that this was SARS all over again. So we quickly brought together the union as well as the Singapore Tourism Board. We had very close meetings. We came out with the pandemic checklist. We worked very closely together. And then the government heard us and ended up coming out to support our industry. They could see that it has become quite bad for the industry. We're one of the early indicators. So the Singapore government came out with a budget, and I have to say that it's a very generous budget. About 20% of GDP was spent in 2020. To support many industries. Ours is one of the industries as well. This year, they've also supported us as well because recovery is a bit slower. So we're very thankful for that through the quarantine business, as well as STB also came out with the Singapore Rediscovers campaign, a 320 million spend local campaign. So that has helped our hotels. The other thing is really resilience. Many of our members just held in there. We pivoted, we changed our offering to be more attractive to locals. The staycation business is actually very, very different. So that is how we survive this. Well, actually the pandemic is still going on, so we're still surviving it and coping.
Mm-hmm. Do you think these lessons will alter how Singapore hotels do their business and derive their core revenues?
Well, I think one of the things that has changed is probably the customer demands. I think international travelers, when they come back, which I do believe that they'll come back, there's a lot of pent-up demand, is that they will be more discerning and they will value safety and security and wellness a lot more. So one of the things that Singapore has done is that we have the SG Clean program, which was rolled out actually very early as well. One of the lessons we had learned from SARS, and this ensures that any visitors who stay at our hotels make sure that they follow a set of protocols. The other thing that we do notice is that probably leisure will come back before business when the borders open up a bit more. So these are some of the things that may change in terms of business. One of the other things that has changed for COVID is that our business has been focused a lot on our local F&B as well, which pre-pandemic was not as large a business. In terms of operations, because of the border closures, that has also impacted our labor supply. Many of the Malaysian colleagues or the PRC colleagues were unable to come back. So we were faced with a manpower shortage, and thankfully, our industry had actually gone through a job redesign and a productivity round a few years ago already. So we were already capable of handling this. Many of our staff had to be more flexible. They moved into positions they may not be comfortable with, but they did it. Everyone put their hands on, all hands were on deck, and we tried to help out in whatever ways as possible. And I think going forward, that's probably some of the things that we would hold on to, this flexibility in job scope, this productivity emphasis, the shift to digital, a lot of check-ins now are contactless. I think those are things that are here to stay.
Okay. Now, clearly you can see that there's a good game plan going on for the Singapore tourism and hotels segment. But is it possible to guard against similar business devastation when the next global pandemic occurs?
Well, Karen, I would say that the current global pandemic is already probably on the maximum scale of stress for our industry. So I think if we can survive this, we can probably survive anything. We have in place so many protocols, so many safety measurements, all sorts of vaccinations. We're going through massive vaccinations now. I'm happy to say that actually our Singapore hotel force was one of the early ones to get vaccinated because we're on the front line. So I would definitely say that we're ready for the next pandemic, but please don't come so soon.
That's right, man. What can the Singapore Hotel Association do to help members in their pandemic preparedness? What has been done already so far to guide members through this crisis?
So the key thing really has been open communications with the government, with our members, with the union, because we're all in the same boat. Everyone is tackling this crisis, honestly, for the first time. I mentioned earlier that we took out the SARS playbook. Honestly, within 3 months, we had to throw that out because this was unlike anything that we had ever seen. So really open communications. I think rules were changing so much so fast with the government. So SHA, the Hotel Association, became a good repository of information. If our members had any questions about some of the new policies or regulations, they would channel that up. If operationally there were issues carrying it out, we would also be the conduit for the discussion with the government. So it was a very, very good partnership. We had joint task force. I know that in the beginning you had mentioned a few of the task force that I am a part of. Those involve a lot of government parties as well as ourselves and the union. So all of us were working together to try to solve these problems.
Okay. Now, Singapore has recently kicked off its Connect at Singapore scheme, which allows a limited number of businesses, official and high economic value travelers from all countries to enter and stay in appointed facilities for a short time in Singapore. While this initiative gets travel recovery going in a more stable form, what will it mean for hotels here, since only a selected few would qualify for the scheme and tourist spend would be limited to within those appointed facilities?
Singapore has been trying to reopen its borders in multiple ways. Minister Ong Ye Kung had mentioned in a speech in March, he's the Minister for Transportation, that there are 4 ways that Singapore is going to reopen. So one will be testing travelers. And recently they had mentioned the IATA travel pass, which will help with the digitization of this. The second is bubble wrapping, and this is where Changi Connect at Singapore comes in. The third is reopening borders to countries that have controlled the virus. And the fourth is less onerous quarantine for vaccinated travelers. So these are all the different ways that Singapore is trying to reopen. SHA has been part of this Travel Alliance for the Emerging Stronger Task Force, where we worked with different government agencies, STB, as well as Changi Airport, to come up with the hybrid event, which is called Travel Revive last year. And this was one of the first events that happened around the world where we brought in 1,000 people to have a MICE event. So this was a very successful pilot that sort of paved the way for different protocols for having MICE in a COVID world? Because I think Singapore's strategy has always been to minimize risk and not eliminate risk.
Okay, great. So that's all the 5 questions I have for you, Wei-Lin. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Karen.
And to everyone, take care and stay safe. I'll see you on the next episode, yeah? Goodbye.